welcome back. We are back in the booth with the Hunt Hike Harvest podcast. I am joined by Jason, not as always, but today.
I'm not rotating my shoe trees today.
Yeah, and we have a special guest today, someone that we have just recently kind of been in contact with, but not necessarily more on a personal level. We've got Jake Hollenbeck on the show today. We are going to talk about the Mantis systems, the Mantis shooting systems, their dry fire systems. If you have followed us at all, you have seen that we have put out numerous reviews on the Mantis systems, and obviously Jason and I have spoke very highly about how they have been a game changer for us. They have helped us get probably thousands.
They're a lot of fun to use.
Thousands of rounds.
And I can do it in the office.
We can do it in the office, which is really cool. We're pretty busy, so we're excited to have Jake on the podcast today. Jake, how are you doing?
You guys, fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be with Triple H today, and it was fantastic meeting Joel and Jason, and I'm excited to get into our gear with you guys.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we are too. We've told and showed and tried to let more and more people know. I know we have friends that are a lot into the shooting side of things. We have actually a former employee who did a lot of 3-gun work and some stuff like that. I did a trip with a guy that shoots competitively, very competitively this summer. And I was telling him, I'm like, man, where do you go? How many rounds do you typically use in a month and that type of stuff. And so we're trying to carry the flag the best that we can. But I think it's most important. We have to start by kind of letting people know, what is Mantis? First and foremost would probably be important. We know, but let our audience know kind of what are the Mantis systems, maybe how, if you can, even historically, where did the concept of Mantis come from? Because I think that it's genius from a perspective of someone that maybe really has a high desire to shoot more often. Maybe doesn't have the time. Maybe we talked right before
financial capabilities
right. In terms of what
Yep.
ammo costs. So let's just start there and kind of lead us into this conversation. Then we'll get a little bit more into the product lines.
Yeah. So Mantis really, what we do is we market out and sell marksmanship improvement, devices essentially, and our flagship line, the Mantis X series, which I think you guys have the Mantis X10 Elite, which is
Correct.
our top of the line and what we do. The whole point of those devices is to read your fundamentals, watch the movement of the muzzle and how it moves, and then it gives you a bunch of feedback on all of your fundamentals, which in turn gives you remediation, allows you to grow and improve as a shooter. So first and foremost, we're marksmanship improvement, and that's what we do. As far as what do we offer, we've essentially got 3 product lines. We've got the Mantis X series, which the X10 is the top of that line. We've got the AR-15 specific systems. Those are called the Blackbeard, which we've recently released the MCX version of that as well. So it's not just mil-spec AR-15s anymore. And then finally, we've got the point of impact laser system. That's called the Laser Academy.
Yeah.
And Jason, I think you were just referring to, you can get a ton of trigger presses in and save while doing it. Dry fire. Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. We've got dry fire options. The X10, that also works live fire too. So
right,
you get this
correct.
feedback cycle going, take it out with you live at the range or while you're hunting, whatever you're doing, you get that feedback there too.
Yeah. I'll tell you the part about the Blackbeard that I love the most when we first got our hands on it is the auto cycle. Because, with the X10 Elite, if you're using it on a pistol, I got to rack the pistol every time and then reacquire the target, which again, not bad in terms of, what we're doing for training. But
right.
With the AR platform, I pull the trigger, it cycles, and I can pull it again, and I can pull it again, and I can do it as fast as I want. So there's no, I don't have to pull the bolt back or I don't have to reset anything. It does it automatically for me. It's super cool because it allows me to get in more quality reps in a shorter amount of time.
Yeah, 100%. And if you watch the review we did, I even took it a step further when we did that Blackbeard review, because I have a friend who works in the military in some kind of like special operations and stuff like that. And I said, hey man, would you be willing to come up and kind of be our model for the day? He's not necessarily a guy that was too fired up about, I think, being on camera, but I was like, you know what, a couple of like,
if we tried it,
like
it
us
was
that, probably aren't as proficient
to avoid ridicule.
Yeah,
we got an expert.
Exactly. So I brought someone in who probably has tens of thousands of more trigger pulls than either of us.
He's probably done it in real life.
Yeah.
And he looks great doing it too,
Oh, 100%. He went full tack gear. It was awesome. And the cool part was I was like, what could we do to really showcase this thing? And for those of you that don't know, the way that Blackbeard system works is you have what is a magazine that you utilize that replaces your existing magazine, and then as you take out your bolt carrier kind of assembly, it fits into there, and those two marry together, and actually that bolt carrier piece will continue to cycle the trigger for you. So you have real-time capability to pull the trigger just as if you would if you were shooting live rounds. And then it also has the technology piece into it, which is it's giving you feedback. It's providing you with all that other information as far as like what you're doing, any flaws and that type of stuff. And we had him come out and was like, let's have him go through. We have about a 12,000 square foot building. And I said, let's go outside and I want you to roll through our building as if you're trying to clear it. And he was like, okay. And so I just literally filmed him as if, we had like a hostage situation or, some type of scenario, and filmed him going around. And I had targets kind of hung up in the building, and to watch how like much better he was at that than us. If you watch it, we'll provide the link for it up there. There's a point where I just did like a zoom on the target, and he fired probably 10 shots that hit center mass in a matter of like 4 seconds.
His trigger control is superior to ours.
And so that was pretty cool. Yeah,
he's highly skilled and trained.
Yes,
by the U.S. military. So
board certified.
Oh, that's
The cool part too is he was using my AR platform.
Yeah.
So the idea that he was able to put those shots on there, I'm like, all right, so it's the Indian, it's not the arrow.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%.
That's 100% me.
I felt better. I felt better about my gun.
Yeah. So that that's a pretty good kind of like overview of what the Blackbeard system is like. Let's talk a little bit about the Laser Academy. That's where we started, was with the Laser Academy, and then we went to the X10 Elite. So let's kind of work through there. And I think your flagship or kind of first product was the Laser Academy. Am I correct?
No, actually, we started with the X series. It was called the Mantis.
Oh,
X.
really? Okay.
Yep, when it first came out.
Gotcha.
And that was what you guys have now with the easy clip system, and that was all V2 sensor stuff. The original looked entirely different, and you actually needed hardware to get it mounted onto the rail. But that's where we started. And actually, our ownership, it's a couple of brothers who kind of started this as a passion project. And our chief operating officer, his Slack, his little profile picture is actually him with a really old cell phone, just like rubber banded to a pistol so that they could hack the accelerometer on this old Android phone. That's how everything kind of started from there. And that's what got it going is, how do we track the motion instead of having, like cameras watching you while you do your work, or, you need to be compact, mobile, needed to mount to the actual firearm. So, that's where that got started. And then I think it was just a couple of years after that, people were asking like, hey, is there anything we can do for point of impact? I want to see where my shots are landing. I'm glad I'm getting all this fundamental feedback and learning how to shoot from there. So that's where we came up with the Laser Academy.
Nice. Well, there's a small differentiation with the Laser Academy, which is I know you guys offer it in various calibers, right? So I think we
have the 9mm.
We used it with a 9. You can use it with, I think, a 22. What all calibers are offered in that? I know I've looked at it before, but I'm just
Yeah. So you've got the 9. We've got 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 ACP, and Long Colt, 38. What else do we have? I think that's pretty close to what we have. We also have a 223 cartridge, which is more used in the hunting world than it is, obviously for the AR,
Right.
you would probably get the Blackbeard, but
right.
yeah, we
sure.
do have one in 223 as well.
Yeah, and
So it's all the popular calibers.
Yeah, for the most part, and so just so that if you're watching, essentially, it looks and feels, a lot similar to what the round would look like, and you're going to actually load that, you're going to chamber that, and what that piece does is it actually will, when the pin hits the back of that sensor, is it's actually sending a laser to that, as he said, like point of contact. So you get to see where that thing lands. So, I think for a lot of, kind of similarities, I say, like people bore sight and do some things like that, where it's like, it has a similar feel to that, except obviously it's going to only be when you're actually pulling the trigger and that type of thing. So, and there is some sensitivity to that, making, some adjustments and stuff to make sure that you're getting it where you need it. And then the cool part with that, which, we haven't talked about, that really is kind of all encompassing with all the systems is it's providing that information via Bluetooth back to your mobile device or whatever. There's an app that coincides with the systems themselves. And that's where it gets really cool, because for me, being someone where I grew up in, upland bird hunting, waterfowling, things like that. My dad was never really like a big game hunter, and we never had any handguns or anything like that in the house. So as I moved out to the West, and, my first firearm from a handgun perspective was for bear defense and things like that. And I was like, man, this is completely foreign to me. I can recall like going to the range for the first time, and I didn't even know like where in the world any of my shots were going because it was such a new thing. And as we started using the Laser Academy, all of a sudden it's giving me feedback to the app of, anticipating the trigger and,
or slapping or pulling,
pulling, all these different things. And it's essentially a virtual coach. So talk about how that, that communication works and how it's gathering that information. Cause I think it's really cool, because for me, I think I liken it to golf, where, you go out with a buddy and he's like trying to tell you like what you did wrong all the time. And you're like, all right, well, that's not really helping me. Whereas this system is
get your top hand in there and your hips aren't working.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
So yeah.
And whereas this,
but not from a place of education.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So I'll take it back like 5 seconds, Joel. One is, so we've got a number of applications, right? We've got the Mantis X pistol rifle app. That one is designed specifically for pistols and rifles with our Mantis X series and the Blackbeard X. Then we've also got the shotgun app. That's designed, right now it's kind of American skeet centric. That's got a lot of updates coming out for it though. It's got settings for upland bird, things like that. And then we also have the archery app, which obviously you're also familiar with. You can use recurver compound bow and get following on that. The Laser Academy app is the only one of our apps that doesn't use Bluetooth. And the way that works is, you were talking about the Pink Rhino laser cartridges that we sell, and I have one here. And what this is just this little brass guy, and just like you said, it squeezes right into the breech, right with the laser facing down the bore of the whatever you're shooting pistol. And then on the end of it, it's got this little rubber base cap, so that every time a firing pin or hammer strikes it, it takes off that one shot. Well, when that laser splash goes down and it hits our smart target, your camera that's running the app, or your phone that's running the app, utilizes the camera and looks at where that splash happened on the target, and then that's how it's able to give you your point of aim impact there. So that's just kind of the difference between how those two work. Now, you were asking about how does the X series work? How does it detect your movement? How does it all work? It runs off of an accelerometer and a gyroscope. So when you have the sensor linked up to the application, it's constantly live streaming data. It's over 400 points of data a second, essentially. And then it's built off of algorithms that the application runs. So as an example of this, you've got it mounted to one of your pistols, right? You're not familiar with it. You want to get better with it. The sensor and the algorithm will know the difference between hammer strike versus slamming in a new magazine versus racking the slide, whatever it is. All these algorithms can detect the difference, right? So as soon as hammer strike is detected, all of that live data gets rewound by, about half a second. And then that's how the sensor can actually extrapolate all the movement that happened leading up to the trigger press, during the trigger press. And then that's how it knows how you moved when you took that shot. And then from there, that's how it's, it can give you the remediation on, oh, you're slapping the trigger or you're pushing with your support hand, whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. That to me was probably the most helpful early on as we started using it, right? Like,
yeah, you were frustrated early.
Yeah, oh, for sure, right? Because
there's no way I'm doing that.
Yeah,
like, telling you, you're pulling it. Like, I don't know.
And
man,
so
it's not lying.
And so I think those are the things that if you take someone like me who's severely remedial, and I essentially am trying to figure out, like, what the heck am I doing wrong? I think a lot of times, especially with handguns, especially, as you get into things that are obviously more precision based with long rifles and some of those types of things, right? Like, you're talking about such minute things that, if you're at 10 yards and you move that out to 20, you can go from being on target to missing a target entirely, right? And if it continues to go out even further, now you're talking about, like, not even being anywhere in the neighborhood based on some of the small things that you either are doing right or doing wrong. And when I started to get some of that feedback, all of a sudden, you become more aware of things like your grip. You become more aware of, trigger pressure, even necessarily, I know for me, one of the things was in Jason and I even talking and kind of watching each other and then looking at the feedback was like, even where my pressure and hold on the trigger was in general. There's so many things that can go right and wrong in what seems like a relatively easy transaction, yet at the same time, it has such small barriers of success and failure to be, to have that shot end up where you want it to be. So that's been probably the coolest part for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And even, just like you're saying with, long range precision, things like that, everything goes into that, right? So when you've got one of the sensors on there, and you got it set up for rifle, it's going to give you all that. It's going to tell you, hey, you're shouldering, your cheek position, are you pushing with your support hand? All of those things are going to get read, and you'll get that feedback. And yeah, it's incredibly surprising how even the most minuscule movement can throw you off, a long ways down the range.
Yeah, most definitely. So in looking at that, the X10, for example, I know we've had people that have went on our reviews and they've watched one or more of them. And I think the question that we got a lot was like, okay, we ended up doing a third review, which was kind of a compare and contrast between Laser Academy and the X10 system, because we felt like one of the things that people that are looking at your product line kind of want to know is, like, what's the difference between the two? Why would I choose one over the other? Obviously, the live fire aspect of the X10 piece is a huge differentiator. But if you're just thinking in terms of like dry firing and that type of stuff, wanting to practice, wanting to get some of that feedback, that type of thing, what would you tell someone as they go and start to kind of like look at those and go like, how do I decide which one fits me better? Like maybe some pros and cons or whatever.
Yeah. So flatly speaking, the easiest analogies we use when we get that question is two things. One, the X series, it's easy to think about as a digital coach, right? That's where you're going to go get the class, the feedback, work on your fundamentals. And then two, the Laser Academy simulates a flat range. So you're going to get point of impact, and you're not going to get the coaching feedback. You're not going to get told what's going on with your grip and your trigger press. And that's the largest difference between the two systems, right? They both use different apps. They both serve kind of different purposes in that, one, you're going to get all these analytics and feedback based on how well you're shooting. And then with the Laser Academy too, this is where your shots are landing, and that's what you're going to get, So there are some similarities with, you can run similar drills between the two: shot timer, par timer, open shooting, hostage rescue, things like that are present on both systems. But the reality is with the sensor, it's kind of like a Fitbit, right? It's going to give you all of your statistics on, your fundamentals, your health of shooting. And then with the Laser Academy, you're getting your point of impact, and that's about it. So when people ask us, where do I start? What should I get first? Like, what's the best for me? We almost always point them towards, the X series. It's a little bit easier setup, and there's a lot more availability on what you can do. You're just never going to see point of impact with that system. If you like that, you're enjoying the feedback, come back, get the Laser Academy. It really adds to the experience.
For sure.
Let me ask you, obviously, we're talking about it in practice scenarios. In your experience, what's the best way, if I'm using X10 or Laser Academy, I want to elevate my heart rate. I want to get my body feeling like it might be in a situation in which I might use my my firearm. What do you guys recommend in terms of getting that feeling of, elevated heart rate or that adrenaline rush that would cause me to deviate from my training, or at least just allow me to train with that elevated state where I can then focus on those mechanics?
Yeah. So if you're trying to get some toughened training going using something like the Laser Academy system, the only limitation that you'll run into is that the camera needs to be able to view the smart target, right? So we don't have a way to be able to go, say, room to room where you've got multiple targets and you want impact data going room to room. That's something that we've got a lot of requests for, and usually is the best way to get that heart rate up. But on that, if you were doing like bill drills or pyramid drills or 1 to 5s, you can get your camera back, say, 10, 11 feet, anything like that. Use the zoom feature a little bit if you want to, really stagger your targets out, still in camera and still being able to be recognized. Then you can do that. You can do a little bit of multi-target. You can do a little bit of moving and shooting at the same time. And trying to simulate, especially with something like the hostage feedback. And I think another feature you guys might really enjoy is we have a feature called Dual.
So I was just thinking about that.
Yeah. You can both have the same target set up being recognized by the camera, and then there's a feature that would, we've got like the hunt target who has faster, better hunt scores.
Gosh.
So you can compete, and that gets the blood pumping for sure.
Sure.
The game of fun.
Well, it's also you're making more meaningful shots. I think that's kind of where I was getting to. I'm thinking about in terms of using it for, let's say, concealed carry, right? And I want to just train certain scenarios, whether it's a draw or hip fire or something like that, where, in that scenario, obviously, if I'm training at home and I'm, that's not really happening, I'm going to be cool as a cucumber, but I want to get myself into a position where I need to make a meaningful shot under duress.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
The stress
Something to
inoculation
that.
piece is big.
Yeah. Yep. And you guys, if you wanted to, like if you're doing it there at the studio or together in the office or anything, something I've done with my wife here at the house is, just, hey, babe, go move the target to a different point of the room or anything like that. Close the door behind you on the way out, and then, simulate that situation of, I saw somebody
That's a
in the
good
living
idea.
room and I want you to go handle it. And that's when, I'm running concealed or
I like it.
open or, and
Yeah.
get surprised when I go into the room is to locate the target and get a good press.
Go grab it from the bedside and run down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's a really good idea. I do like that. I know as we kind of, and I want to kind of get into some of the stuff that you mentioned, right? Like the dual feature. We talk about like within the app, there's the availability to do stuff on, par time and the hunt feature. And you mentioned like the hostage rescue and all that. Let's talk a little bit about the functionality of that. Cause I know I think we first started, we just kind of kicked around and tried different things. And then,
Yeah, we played with all the modes.
right.
I do like some
Right.
of the modes that make you do some decision making.
Right.
It's like you've got a square, a circle, and a triangle, and they've got numbers in them, and you've got to pick. It tells you which one to shoot, then you've got to find where it is on the sheet. You've got to do that split second, decision making.
That
Yep.
was the big stress one for me.
That was the one. Yeah, that was the one you sucked at.
Yeah, like as soon as we started doing that, and so within the app, just to clarify, right there's the option that Jason is talking about, and there's a target that has square, triangle, circle. Within each one of those, they have different numbers on them, and then they're also different shades. And so you can set up within the app your specific par times based on your ability. And you can start narrowing those down so that you have to improve your reaction time, your decision making. And then it's also going to track how well did you actually do. And I can tell you when we first did that, like it was disastrous. So there's your stress testing, right? A little bit right there, because as soon as that started happening where you had to start making decisions as opposed to just being like, okay, here we go, right? Like I'm going to just, do my thing and try and make a good shot. Now it was, you have to do it in a certain amount of time, make the correct decision, and then also try and get it on that specific target. So talk a little bit about some of that. I think the academy within there is really cool as well. I know I went through that where essentially it's kind of level based. You have to go from one completed in specific kind of success before you can move to the next. So
it's gamified.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that, because I think that stuff is also something where it challenges the individual. It really puts kind of markers on you being able to advance, or to go to Jason's point, like adding stress and adding your level of proficiency, as well as maybe some of that added stress to that. Talk about a little bit with your programs with all that.
Yeah, so a couple things on that actually. One, if you do, just like you said, you can adjust the intensity, the difficulty. How quick do I have to react? How many targets are they going to ask me to pick out? Beyond that, do you want to keep it as simple as, oh, I'm only shooting 2 different colored triangles versus do I need to hunt between the 4 triangles, ones that has a 1 in it, one that has a 2 in it? So you can really start layering that to amplify that intensity. Something I would say that, often we don't get to talk about a lot with the Laser Academy is there are courses built in. So you get all these drills that you can run when you got them set up. But there are also courses in there. So, basic marksmanship, advanced marksmanship. We've got riflemen in there as well. So if you've got your Blackbeard, you can be doing rifleman drills as well. That's something that does a good job. The system does by itself as far as adjusting the difficulty for you and forcing you to grow and become, faster, a little bit more proficient, quicker recognizing of certain targets and things like that. Another thing that I think is really cool that we don't often talk about because it requires 2 devices is, say for example, you've got the Blackbeard X. It's got the sensor built into the magazine, right? So you can get your tablet out, get your Mantis X pistol rifle app downloaded on your tablet, hook up your Blackbeard, and set that up for Blackbeard dynamics. That's my favorite thing about the Blackbeard. It's instead of focusing so much on how good was your trigger press and what did your fundamentals look like, it also gives you the dynamics of handling your rifle. So how well did you transition from target A to target B? Did you swoop over? How much over travel did you have? How long did you delay on target before you pulled the trigger? Things like that are built into that analytics and feedback. So if you've got that set up, and then you go get your Laser Academy set up on your phone and do something like the hunt that we were just talking about, or hostage rescue, then not only are you going to be forced to push and go faster and see what's happening with your point of impact and how well you're doing that scoring, but also on the back end, you're going to get your dynamics and your feedback based on, how well were you actually picking between targets? How much did you over travel? How long were you on the target before you pulled the trigger? Using those together is a fantastic way to really continue pushing that skill level and building.
Yeah, and I think as you're kind of talking about that, my mind kind of goes to your law enforcement personnel, your military folks, and things like that, where as you obviously gain some proficiency in your shooting ability and you start then expanding that out now into let's create situational based type shooting. I know I've talked with and been around a lot of guys that in our world that will go out and go to the range and go through training iterations and stuff like that with guys to watch, like, how do they, set up and do those types of things? Because at some point, friends of mine that work in like special operations and things like that, you get some of these units and some, depending upon where they're at, and they are 100% in live fire mode. They never do anything in simulation. They never do anything where, it's just kind of running through the motions. And when you think about some of that stuff where you can add that level of mechanics and where those small, fractions of a second and, small amounts of minor movements and things like that could be, obviously we're talking about catastrophic in some of these cases with some of these folks. You realize like how valuable some of this is. Whereas Jason, I think about it and go like, oh, that would be cool. And like, let me see if I can do it better than you and whatever. And yes, when we think about how crazy our world is right now, the reality of trying to keep yourself obviously always prepared and stuff like that. But I don't think it's ever at that level where it is more or less your job, right? And some of the stuff you're talking about, I think really hits home.
It's life or death.
Yeah, 100%.
Versus gamified in training.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
and I do think you guys that this can apply in, all disciplines of the shooting world, right? If you've got your AR and, you've got a red dot on it and you're working on, how well am I transitioning between these two silhouettes and what is my time and target identification, things like that. Yeah, they are. They're a little bit more defense based. They're a little bit more, just like you said, military and law enforcement applicable. But if you think about it in terms of like, I grew up in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and up there,
nice.
We used to do all sorts of hunting. One of my favorite was pronghorn. You're out in open plains. It's not as easy to stalk. You can't stand in a tree stand, or getting a blind out there's a lot more difficult operation. Yeah. Being able to know that my swing speed was right if they're going to start running, how far away am I? All those kind of calculations really start dialing in on, was my target acquisition good? When we're looking at the vitals hitbox on, like a deer-sized animal like a pronghorn, you've got that normal kind of 8 to 10 inch, area that you need to hit. And sometimes when you're out there 150, 200 yards and they've got you spooked or they smell you or anything like that, then you're getting into reaction mode and thinking about your timing and how well was my placement.
For sure.
So, it depends on the mindset you're in when you're going to go out and do your training. certainly. But yeah, so it really, I think, and we believe it can be used on all disciplines of shooting.
Most definitely.
So we've briefly touched on some law enforcement stuff. How well has the product been received in the law enforcement community or even the military community? And then, in terms of like saturation or, usage, those types of things.
Yeah, really, really well, Jason. And honestly, so the Blackbeard, as an example, all new Marine recruits that are going through Paris Island are using these units right now.
That's awesome.
We've got awesome statistics that show, qualifications have kind of average around 70 to 80% on who's getting through qualification, and that's kind of military wide. And when we ran our first test batches through the Marine Corps boots, everyone who got hands-on with a Blackbeard X and got the feedback they needed ended up qualifying at 100%. So everyone who used one ended up qualifying under Marine Corps standards. So that's proof in the pudding right there. Is
For sure.
You get your hands on this thing, you're gonna grow and learn and be able to become a better shooter. Now, we've got all sorts of independent units and stuff reaching out and purchasing from us, both Blackbeards and X Series. It's not super widespread yet. Obviously, we want that, right? We want everybody to be using our gear. Our company mission, our company goal is train 1 million shooters a year. And we're on par with that, and we have been. So, yeah,
That's awesome.
As far as adoption right now, it's going well. When they get into unit hands, we get good feedback, we see good results, and that goes for law enforcement as well. The struggle for law enforcement is they don't get, depending on which department and what part of the country we're talking about, a lot of the times they don't get access to range time regularly, which is kind of what we all
it's
we all
insane.
need. Yeah.
Right.
So
I had a conversation. So I had a conversation with someone who runs an academy, and I believe in one of the courses that I teach, that we have actually one next week, and I'll have military, fire, police, all forms. You've had DEA, CIA, all kinds of different things that come in. And a lady that was one of the academy instructors, I believe she was in Oklahoma, maybe even Texas. And she told me that they only have to qual one time a year, and that most of their people only get on range maybe one other time in a year. And I was like, that seems absurd to me. Someone who's carrying a firearm every single day, and they're only having to essentially utilize that firearm or practice or put in any time on that one time a year. And I'm like, the stuff we talked about in terms of the stress inoculation piece and whatever else, like if that's all you're doing with that, I don't have very good confidence. And this is not a knock on law enforcement. This is more on the administrative portion of this, understanding that this should be obviously at a much higher level. And our conversation today, talking with you and the Mantis systems, is like, this is such a plug and play simple solution where, yes, I know people have business,
and it's cost effective.
Yeah, cost effective, right? Like that's a huge part of it, right? You're going to
range ammos. I mean, just ammo in general is not cheap, but when you're
right,
you got an agency and you've got several hundred, officers that have to shoot, weekly or whatever it is, ammo gets expensive.
Yeah. And so that just kind of blew me away. And that's where, in a lot of times when I've had conversations with folks like that, I'm like, have you guys ever looked at the Mantis systems? Because I'm like, this could be a tremendous solution for you, right? Like even if it was on an individual basis, because I get frustrations from some of those folks that are like, they know it's a problem. And I'm like, there are solutions, right? Like, yes, if it's a budgetary thing where it's like, well, we can't afford to have, I know like Colorado Springs, for example, there's over 700 people on the CSPD. And I'm like, yeah, that's going to cost a lot of money if you want everybody to shoot once a month, right? Like I get that, right? But if you had even 10, 15 or whatever, Mantis systems that you dedicated within, the academy or, within the station or whatever else, like you could literally say like, hey, you've got to do 30 minutes a month. Even that would be a massive step in the right direction, right? Where you
Yeah.
don't have to go to the range, don't have to expend more ammo. You're going to buy once, cry once type situation, of course. But at the end of the day, could be monumental.
Well, and I know that almost, quite a few officers I've talked to, law enforcement officials, even people in the military, they're willing to expend, some of their own personal budget to be able to get more range time and go get more trigger pulls in. And it's just like you were speaking to there. It's even if it's at an individual level, we always get the positive feedback from law enforcement and military saying like, hey, I needed this so bad. I needed to be able to go train multiple times a month or anything like that, where our units and our precincts and our stations just can't afford to do that because of the quantity of personnel that are on the force, and so that's something we always try to talk to. And you're right, Joel. You don't each have to have your own. I mean, that would be fantastic, but the reality is
Sure.
you need 10, you need 15, you need 20. The app's free. Take your phone with you to the range. And you're right. Go spend an hour a month. Get those trigger pulls in and get the feedback you need.
100%. So kind of along that line, I know that I've had this, and I'm just curious if you guys have had this feedback, especially within the military. And as you get, I think from, general military, right, big army and things like that. But as you start to specialize and you start to get into kind of higher levels, if you will, a friend of mine who works, kind of in that neighborhood, and he was in New Mexico for the past couple of years, and he was talking about that. And so we had this conversation. We're talking about Mantis, and he kind of mentioned me. He says, "Well, how does it operate?" And so I kind of tell him whatever else. He's like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "We can't have anything that has any Bluetooth. We can't even bring our phones in." Have you guys had any feedback in terms of that stuff? Granted, this is a really tough one because now you're talking about, kind of levels of security, national security, all these things, and there's high sensitivity to that stuff. But what have you guys had any feedback with that? Because I know for me, I was like, man, like that's a total disqualifier. That sucks because this could be really good for you guys.
Yeah, and really, it's not a policy oversight on things like that. I used to work in a skiff when I was in the military, so I understand not being able to take in anything that transmits any form of data at all, and that's the problem with some of those. Some things that we've talked about, as far as maybe like a special order or a unit specific kind of thing, two things. One, if you didn't want to do Bluetooth, there might be a way to be able to store this data on board, right? Like you could put an SD card or have local storage on the device itself. That way it stays at the range, whatever.
Right.
But doing that would mean that getting all the feedback and trying to, the way that the software works now, you would have to pull that memory storage or link that memory storage to something where you could get the feedback on the device, where the device could read the raw data and say, okay, this shooting session, out of all these shots, here's what happened shot to shot. That's a possibility. And another thing we've kind of talked about there is being able to have serialized items that go into sensitive areas. So as an example, this number of X series sensors that are serialized are paired only with and directly to these devices that don't have an internet connection, that have the application pre-installed. That way you don't have to worry about data being stolen or transmitted out of the sensitive area.
Sure.
We've heard that in the past. We haven't had, I think maybe less than a handful of customers that have truly been able to say no because of that technology.
Sure. I think it's small,
when
right?
you get to that level, it's a concern, right?
Yeah, most definitely. I know, like I said, I've had a few of those instances, and I don't think it's one of those things where you're like, well, that's going to put, the whole company in trouble because it's such a smaller, segment of what you're talking about. And at the same time, in this digital era that we live in, everything runs off of some type of signal. And just listening to someone the other day, they were talking about the fact that if people want to gather information well, guess what? We're too late because there's way too much information already out there. And so to get down to that, like such specialized and small amount where you're talking about, very, very, what I would consider be minute amounts of things that most of us in the general public just should be thankful we sleep well at night about.
Yeah.
It is what it is, right? So
Yeah, for sure. But it's always a good thing to think about.
yeah,
Our engineering team is constantly churning out, and we're getting requests all the time. We love getting feedback. We've got a really cool channel that the whole company shares in Slack, where anytime something comes in, our operations manager, she tags that stuff, lets everybody know, what are the odds we can get this rolled out? How can we get it built in? So yeah, our engineers are full speed all the time, constantly wanting to grow the systems and improve.
Speaking of engineers, is there any, you don't have to divulge any company secrets here, but is there any plans for a Blackbeard pistol version?
So obviously we've got that. That's our number one request is we love the Blackbeard. How do I get it in my pistol? I can tell you it's obviously something that we are chomping away at to try and figure out.
yeah,
If we're able to make something like that happen, the first versions of those that come out are likely going to be in pistol model lines that have high intra-model compatibility, right? So I'm sure you could think of a couple of brands who use all of their own magazines for caliber or barrels or things like that.
yeah,
The big deal with that, the big deal with that is it doesn't matter who makes the AR-15 or the AR-10 because
Right. It's
they're
all
mil
mil
spec,
spec.
right? It's all mil
yeah,
spec. So that was why we were able to get away with it so easily, is because we knew no matter
yeah,
what platform it was going to go into, it had this base of functionality.
right,
So the pistols have been a massive challenge. That being said, we admire some other companies who have been able to come up with some solutions. So I don't know if you guys have seen like Dry Fire Mag or Cool Fire Trainer. Our systems work great with those, and in the short-term future here, that would be a good solution for you to use if you do want multiple trigger presses with our gear.
yeah.
So yeah, we're definitely trying to
You're
get that
thinking
figured
about
out.
it. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
definitely thinking about it.
Well,
That's
We're
good to know.
serious
I think
about it. I can tell you that. We're serious about
Yeah,
it. But
for sure.
where we're
Yeah.
at, I'm not entirely
yeah.
sure.
There's just a ton of variability there because there's so many different lines of handguns, and
I think that's a slippery slope, especially when you think about that. Just that in itself, right?
right.
Like you could bankrupt the company trying to chase that stuff if you
Yeah.
don't like really choose wisely, right? Like you said, it's like the Blackbeard was, is so awesome, but at the same time,
Yeah.
if you're talking about something that is
You let
mil-spec,
Pandora out of the box and didn't really figure out the ramifications that were going to happen because of it.
yeah, for sure.
Right.
But that's
Yep.
what I mean. I guess it's a good problem for you guys to have because there's always a perpetual need for something along that line. Whether you start with one certain brand or line of handguns and evolve into others, or you just look at sales data and go, all right, there's 9 million Smith and Wesson shields out there, so that's what we're going to start with. So
Yep. And
Got
that's
it.
actually the same thought process when we started developing all the magazine baseplate adapters that we offer a
Mhm.
very large variety of those that we make. And that was kind of the thought process going in, is like, okay, well, there's 12 million 1911s produced in like the last 10 years. Maybe we ought to make something for the 1911
Yeah.
baseplate. Same thing with the.
Well, then you kind of get away from your mission, right? You're creating these dry fire and accuracy systems. Now you're turning into a accessory developer, right?
Yeah,
It's like
we
a
don't stray
side
too far
business.
from the base, but I will
Right.
say,
Yeah.
for our adaptability, we have an impressive list of adapters. We really do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've looked through that. In fact, before we got on today, I was like, let me go take a look at everything on there. And I think seemed like there was so much more than the last time that I looked at it. And of course, in the position that, where are fortunate enough to have what we need. I'm like, what? I guess I didn't really need to look anything. We've got it all. So, but
That just means you need to go buy a new gun, Joel.
well, that's always the case for sure. And I do have my eyes on about 2 different ones right now. So,
it's not hard to get that argument going. It seems like I'm constantly fighting myself and my wife on which gun I need to go buy next. So
yeah.
One year for Christmas, my wife, I didn't own a 45 at all, anything that shot it, and she accidentally bought me 45 ammo.
Let's go.
And I was sitting there going, wait a second, is there a gun coming that goes along with this? She goes, oh no, I bought the wrong one. I'm like, well, now I'm going to have to go get something that shoots this.
Sense,
you
right?
can't return it.
It's your fault, babe. Now I'm doing this.
You can't return it. And I've been eyeing a 1911, so let's go ahead and find one of those.
Jeez, it's just amazing how things work out, right?
Yeah, any excuse.
It's an unfortunate situation.
Yeah. So, well, anything else that maybe we didn't touch on? Well, actually, there is one thing I did want to touch on, because we do have a lot of our folks that are big in the hunting world, obviously, that watch and that we associate with. The one other thing, you mentioned it, but we didn't talk about it, is the X10 also can be taken off, and there's an adapter that goes directly onto your sight where you can mount that X10 to your bow, compound bow or trad bow. And again, we did a review on this. That for us, because we shoot a lot with our bows, we spent a lot of September in the woods hunting with our bows. And for me, that thing was just amazing. And I'm kind of curious. I have a couple questions about that, but using that system is going to provide us with a lot of the same information because of that, all the sensors in there. So a lot of you guys that shoot, you're trying to figure out, like, why didn't I land on target? Was it my brace arm? Is it my anchor? Was it all these things? Talk a little bit about how that same system works or can be utilized with the bow. And then I do have a couple questions I want to ask you about that, because I'm intrigued how it actually works with it.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to preface this with I do almost no archery. As far as
This conversation is over. Let's go. Get out of here.
So it uses, the algorithms are built around whatever the platform is, right? So the way you can get that mounted to a compound bow or a traditional recurve, whatever it is you're shooting, it's going to start looking for all of the mechanics for the archer's shot, and it also takes into effect a little bit of the archer's paradox, right? The way you're actually canting your handle left and right, twisting your handle left and right versus canting the bow left and right, and how level are you when the shot goes off. Based on those mechanics and the vibration profiles from the way that the cams or the limbs vibrate is how it's able to start seeing that feedback and saying, like, hey, maybe this was your anchor point. I can see that your cant is 5 to 10 degrees towards your body or away from your body, whatever it is. And then that's how it's going to start giving that feedback. And the cool thing with the archery app is you can mark your shots, right? So after you release your arrow, you can actually mark how it landed on the target, which then again also adds to all of that data and gives you that feedback.
Yeah. Well, and so that was my first question, was because someone asked me that. They're like, well, how does it know? Like, so let's just say, as you mentioned, right, like everything was dead, right? I was perfectly level. I wasn't, canted. I wasn't, there was nothing going on here. Draw was great. I landed perfectly. And they're like, does that guarantee you that the shot goes where it's supposed to? And I was like, well, not necessarily, because then it becomes, I think maybe that's the small nuance that's maybe a little bit different about that, integration with the bow is you can do everything right in the eyes of kind of the system, but if you're not aimed at the right place, or maybe
or the tuning's off,
or the yardage is off, or whatever, right? There's so many things that can go wrong with, whether it's the bow, whether it's arrow, or it's the flight, whether it's wrong yardage, whether it's so many things. And I'm like, no, but I know that it's kind of like becomes two equations, right? Like, as the owner of the bow and the person that's trying to get that thing tuned and everything where it should be, and making sure that my yardages are on as far as my tape goes and all that stuff, that kind of comes first. A system is going to tell me whether or not I'm doing everything right. And I think
it's checking on the Indian. It's not necessarily concerned about the arrow.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same with firearms practice too. Like, I could have perfect fundamentals taking the shot, but I could miss the target by a mile if I wasn't, if my sight picture wasn't right or anything like that. So
true.
It definitely, it's one of those deals where the system is assuming that you have your gear set up correctly, that you're zeroed in, your yardage is right, that
right.
And if you're not, then you could be taking great shots, but if you're not tuned in right, then the system's just going to tell you you're awesome at sucking, so.
Right, exactly, right? Like,
you took a great shot, but you missed every time.
Yeah, it was perfectly executed bad shot.
60% of the time, it works every time.
Exactly. So you kind of answered my other question, which was, if you go to and watch that review that we did, you can see we show the actual app working while we sent some shots down. And the thing that I found amazing is as I'm drawing, it's actually showing what my draw cycle looks like on the app live. It shows where I settle, and then it's then giving me where my shot release, or the execution of that shot looks like as I'm.
It also shows you your follow through, if I remember right.
And the follow through, right?
Yeah. So when you shoot, that line's it locks. It's doing all the squiggly wigglies, and then you let it go, and then it's tails off, and it kind of shows you, how you're finishing. At the release.
And so, my question with that was, you did answer that, but kind of reiterate that again. Like, how does it track, or how does it know any of that?
Right. So there's kind of two parts to this. One is, because it's running on an accelerometer and a gyroscope, it's able to kind of create its own 3D picture of whatever that it's mounted to. And I don't mean necessarily like, it's wireframing this pistol that I'm shooting. I mean, as far as X, Y, and Z is concerned, it's able to extrapolate. All right, I'm sitting here, I'm calibrated, I know which direction I'm facing. Once that's calibrated and locked in, the rest of the magic happens by the algorithm, right? So we've got algorithms for everything. That's where a lot of the magic is. The accelerometer and gyroscope is just creating this 3D planed environment of what level looks like, which direction I'm facing, and then it's just going to send, like I said, you can measure 400 different points of movement, vibration, acceleration, feedback, all that, just from that 3D environment. And then all of that data gets sent to the software and the algorithm in a live live feed, and then the algorithms are the magic. The algorithms know, okay, based on where I'm located on the bow, based on this vibration profile, which may be release, and combined with the speed that the string came back to set with, I can understand then that the arrow released in this direction, or that your grip was doing A, B, or C, or anything like that. So all of that magic comes from how the algorithm is detecting all of that 400 points of data that it's running, and how it's extrapolating all of the motion and vibration. It is crazy. It really is.
Well, I'm not texting my buddies. I picked up my phone because I wanted to pull this up, and if you can see that, that's actually what a shot cycle kind of looked like, right? So you can see that's actually tracking No, please don't leave any comments about what a crappy shot that probably is or anything like that. But that's what it looks like as you go through the draw cycle and as you settle. It actually is going to give you some diagnosis. It times it. So it's going to tell you how long it took you to actually get to the shot. And then it gives a placement and a stability score, which is really cool. So that's where that sensor also. So like my stability score on that given shot was an 82.9, right? And so for me,
that's debatable.
Hey, that's what it says, man.
It's debatable.
Like,
you need
right? Like,
you need to go retool that algorithm because that wasn't right.
That's a B average the way I look at it. So I
if
don't
you want to
think
be a
that's
B
too bad.
shooter, then go ahead.
Well, not anymore. This is obviously from a long time ago, so
you've improved since then.
Yeah, probably not, but it sounds
because
good.
the X10 helped you, right?
That's
exactly.
Right. That's right.
But like to me, this stuff is just like heightened so much of I think my awareness on things. And as I used any of them for, a period of time, is you start to figure out like some of your common flaws and the things that you do kind of maybe habitually or routinely. And as you start to kind of like figure that stuff out and you become a little bit more cerebral about them, right? And figuring out small corrections, all of a sudden you start realizing like, oh yeah, I need to focus on this, or maybe it changes a little bit of your shot process or whatever that is. And so across all of these lines, whether you're talking about the X10, the Laser Academy, the Blackbeard, or using it as a bow integration, it has just been, I think the last year and a half or however long, we've kind of went through each one of these systems. It kind of actually just kind of reinvigorates me to talk to you and kind of get my brain back in thinking about like, I really need to like get all of them probably back out and keep using them more routinely. I think that's the hard part is you get fired up early on. And then just like anything else, you're like, I got other stuff to do and almost need to keep it kind of fresh where
you're never going to find time. You're going to have to make time.
Damn it, Jason. Yeah. So, but, this has been awesome. Anything that you want to that we didn't touch on that you want to maybe throw in here to kind of put a bow tie on this thing?
To plug you guys. First of all,
I'll do it.
I want to express my gratitude. It's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed the conversation. We appreciate the opportunity to get out here and talk to you guys about this stuff. If anyone who's listening or watching wants some of this, just go check us out at mantisx.com. And we've got all this stuff out there on the site. And then if any of you have any questions or concerns, reach out to us. Contact page is right there, and we've got fantastic customer service, so we're always happy to help you guys out. So thank you again.
100%.
It's been a really good time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate it. We've enjoyed it. Also, don't forget, as a loyal listener and subscriber to our page, if you haven't, please do so. Keep in mind, we also do have an affiliate code for the Mantis systems. We'll provide that down in the comment section below. Take advantage of that. I know we've had quite a few people that have used that that have been based off of watching our reviews and stuff. So we appreciate that. We hope it's helped you. We know that the systems have helped us a ton. You got anything else before we sign off, Chief?
No.
A man of many words. It's always offline. So
yeah. The conversation will happen when we hit stop.
Exactly. So, but well, Jake, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. It's awesome to put a face to a name. We appreciate you guys supporting us, and we will continue to reciprocate that back to you guys as well. So, hope you have an awesome weekend, and we'll try and keep in touch. And don't be afraid if you're in our area to stop in. So,
Fantastic. Thanks again.
Yep.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.